join resources. You should talk to her. Um, yes. We can unless there's okay, no. Yeah, not usually. Yeah. Um, so we have a list of resources, and so can we join our resources with yours? Okay, so she can send them to you. So she's our
Okay.
resource person. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, great. Like I've read all this,
Yeah.
but like give me more. Right, right, right. So, getting your email address.
Okay.
You can do whatever you want to introduce. Oh, thank you. Perfect. So I'll email you our resources. Yeah, and then maybe we can amalgamate a list and circulate it through this winter. That'd be perfect because a lot of ours are on here. So you got a lot of good resources on there, but we have a couple other ones yeah.
So we're also looking for someone other than us to help with a book study. Would you do that? Whenever you think is possible. Like like get a book and kind of post it and whatnot and have conversation about it. We can do it online or we can do it. Yeah. Yeah, we do. Can I give you a little bit of responsibility in our ministry? Would that be okay? Okay. Okay.
Yes.
It wouldn't be too hard. It's just that gathering a little group together. You know, you've done a lot of work. This church has done a lot of work um, already, so it might be a little bit easier.
Okay.
And it's just that.
Like I'm reading EFM right now.
Oh, are you reading EFM as well? Oh
I
my gosh,
am,
I'm sorry.
and I'm interested in the IOM today in Glasgow. But yes,
Yeah, if
and I'm retired and all of that.
so, if you just wanna, yeah, so if you wanna kind of help us formulate something like that. Yeah.
yes, because it would be great to know if we're actually utilizing it. Well, because I'm from
Yeah.
and I'm the regional person in Canada,
Yeah.
we did a list well, based on the stuff and essentially and I put this on the website. And Scottish people are saying, oh, I've never knew that.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to
Yeah.
what colonization is, but I think and it's the language and as I'm having their ethnicity taken away from the country. Yeah,
Culture, yeah.
like it's
Very generous to raise, yeah.
absolutely. And I think that's such a great thing to have a connection with the Irish community because the sort of Christianity is very, I think, very in line with indigenous, like it's its own indigenous Christianity. So it's beautiful.
Iona.
And met with a lot of Aboriginal leaders, etc. Once and I'm the person that's love in September on church day. Like and but I don't know what to do with it.
Absolutely.
Like I don't know how to do that.
We should be having some folks from New Zealand coming in November and in I'm sorry, in September as well. In the Anglican New Zealand September? Yeah, 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 yeah. So yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Yep.
Oh, can I sit down?
Yes. Am I just introducing? Okay. Okay. Oh, were you supposed to introduce us, Mike?
Hi, everyone.
Do you want to do it?
Oh,
Okay.
sure.
Go ahead.
Hi, welcome to St Aidan's. I'm not the priest here, but here, welcome to the Two Row Path presentation. This is our fourth of 4 nights, so it's our culminating experience. And thank you so much to Archdeacon Roz and Hannah for being our guides. What more can I say?
I think that's perfect.
Okay, let's give them a welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. So we thought that we would take it easy on you tonight, and then we started discussing what we wanted to talk about tonight, and then we decided it wasn't going to be very easy. So we're going to give you one last hard night with us. So hopefully you will walk out of here, maybe not with very many answers, but at least with some good questions to ask. And we think that all of you have been engaging in this. All the questions that we've been hearing, the feedback that we've been hearing from you, it's been great. And we hope that you will go forward to continue wrestling with these issues, wrestling with these ideas, and continuing to ask these good questions that you are engaging with here. So we thought that we'd just start off the evening with just a short little, like, I'm going to do like a 2-sentence recap of what we've done over the last 3 weeks so that we can lead into tonight. But as you remember, our first week was really around identity and thinking about hidden identity and identities that perhaps we engage with but we're not quite aware of, right? The second week was sort of around governance and also ways in which society is structured to prop up the comfort and privilege of certain people. And then the third week, why am I saying, I keep wanting to say last week. Last month, thank you, it was Jonah. And it was ideas around how do we come to the table with each other, right? What does reconciliation look like from a biblical sense? So thinking about that, where we wanted to start was we wanted to get a little bit of feedback from you. And we did have a question over here that I'm going to let Roz answer in a second. And we might have you ask your question that you gave us, Janet, okay, in a moment. But we wanted to hear a little bit about where you're sitting tonight. Where are you at? Are there any things that you're coming to this last evening with? Either feelings that are coming up or questions that are coming up. And hopefully we can answer some of them, hopefully. But we'll start over here with Janet. So I'm just going to leave that with you. And you had a good question, if you could just give it to us. And remember that this mic is for the people who are streaming. It's not going to amplify it here.
So my question was, I don't have any Indigenous people in my community, in my church, on my street. So how do I find a person to start those conversations with? If conversation is the first part,
Perfect.
I guess part 2 I was thinking of is there somewhere else I can start in the meantime while I look for this person or place that I can have a conversation?
Great, thank you. So for those who maybe didn't quite hear that, the question was sort of a 2-part. It was, where do we start the conversation if we don't know any Indigenous people? If there are no Indigenous people in our church community, if there's nobody near where we live, how do we find an Indigenous person to have a conversation with? And then part 2 of that question was, what can we do in the meantime if we are looking for that? So I'm going to, as the Indigenous person in the room, Roz, I'm going to throw that one to you. You can answer that. Well, Indigenous, yes. I'm Indigenous to someplace else.
Well, that's a really good question. And that's a really good question because I was asking this very same question in seminary. When I began seminary, there was no Indigenous people in seminary. And of course, if I go back to that time in seminary, it was difficult in that I knew that I was the only person in seminary, and not only that, but how was I going to engage with Christians who weren't Indigenous, or perhaps were Indigenous to somewhere else? How was that going to happen? And so it was a struggle. It was a struggle. And of course, when I say that, I mean it's going to be a struggle for anyone who doesn't have right at their next door neighbor or someone down the street or someone in their parish that's Indigenous, right? And that's okay, because that's where you have to sit right now, right? You have to sit right now. So, I mean, I'm not saying, go rush down to Oneida and park yourself in the gas station, right? Because this is a reality that we're speaking of, right? This is a reality that we're speaking of, because right now we talk about that. Like, imagine if all of us were brave enough. Like, say, okay, for instance, let's pick a community that none of us are a part of. Let's pick I don't know. Let's pick I'm not sure. Let's pick the Korean Christian community, right? I'm not part of the Korean Christian community. No one here, I don't assume, that is not part of the Korean Christian community. Yeah, I want to know about what Korean Christianity is like. I'm going to be a little bit shy to say, start that conversation, right? But to begin with things like this is where we begin, right? We do begin in things like this. And so I'm beginning in those places too, right? So when you ask that question to me, what do I do? I'm also beginning down the road from where you're at, because I started where you're at too. And we're beginning down the road just a little further than you are. So when I say that, what I mean is that right now in Indigenous ministry, and myself as the Indigenous Archdeacon for Truth and Reconciliation Indigenous Ministries, now we're in the process of gathering people together, right? Where non-Indigenous people are starting to take more of a role in truth and reconciliation kind of ministries. Because now we can attach it to all kinds of different things. We're just talking about the situation in Iona, right? And that particular community is Indigenous to a place, right? So I would say to you, it's okay, let's sit there for a moment, but you also have the people next to you as well, right? Now, if your church has not started the conversation yet, and you want to start the conversation with the church, have someone, it doesn't have to be Indigenous, but say, I attended this program, or I attended this event. I read this book, and hand the book to them. I know it's weird. It feels weird. I was there. I'm one of those awkwardly weird people too, so don't worry about that. It's weird. I know it feels weird, but that's where you start. Read this. Look at this. And also know that there are a lot of people in their very same shoes that are starting that conversation as well, either within themselves or with the person next to them, right? This is not an easy thing. We're breaking out of a shell. So don't be ashamed, don't be afraid to have to step out of your comfort zone a little bit. It's okay. It's okay. And even if you got to sit in your discomfort for a little while, that's okay too. I think there's a lot of people in the church that are sitting with discomfort. Now, people, when they don't want to sit in discomfort, I think the easiest thing that we can do is get angry, right? And we can say things like, we give to the Indians too much already, right? And we just kind of pivot and divert, right? But all we have to do is just sit in it and say, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for me? Why am I thinking this way? So I know that's a complicated answer to your question, but the thing is that we have to start feeling a little bit uncomfortable. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a while, okay? So keep the question on, keep it on the front burner, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, because we are going to cover a little bit more, and then we're going to come back to just that very same thing about courage, right? Honor. So Hannah, if the question was again, if anyone else had a question.
Yes. Was there any other questions or comments? Anybody else want to share about where they're at?
For the past couple of years, a few of us in this parish have been kicking around the idea of establishing a healing garden on our property here. I took a step back from that last year and said, is that something that we want to have, or is that something that the Indigenous people would like to have here? Where do we go to get that question answered?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So for those who maybe couldn't quite hear that, I'm just going to repeat the questions just because it's a little bit quiet, a little bit echoey in this room, and you might not hear everything. But the question was, if St. Aidan's wants to create a healing garden, question one, is that something that St. Aidan's wants for itself, or is that something that would be helpful for Indigenous folks? And where would you go to meet with Indigenous partners that would want to engage with that question? So, okay, I'm going to throw to you again, Ross. You're the...
We can join the two questions together almost, right? I love the question. Is this something St. Aidan's wants, or something the Indigenous people want? How do I say this in a very nice way? Right, I can be blunt, but we it's like I want to say to you is that you do need to heal. You need to heal. You do. St. Aidan's does need to heal. So does the cathedral, right? So does St. Mark. So does all of the churches that you might belong to. So you do need a healing garden, and you need it for you, right? And I'm going to just take that question just a little bit further and say this, is that what has happened, instead of really looking at truth and reconciliation and all the uncomfortable parts that brings, we would rather say the Indigenous people need to heal. They just need to heal. They need to heal from being Indigenous, because Indigenous hurts, right? That way I can take the onus off of me and my healing and put it onto someone else. Because no one really wants to admit their vulnerability, right? No one wants to admit that they're a little weird and a little bit uncomfortable. It's hard. It's much easier to turn the spotlight on someone else, right? So when you say about a healing garden, don't be afraid to say St. Aidan's, the church that we're in, the space that we're in, needs to heal. So we're going to bring in some voices to help us do that, to help us walk us through that. And this is what we're doing, right? We're not telling you something necessarily that you don't already know. Some things, yes, but really, I'm here to walk with you, and I'm here to love you, even though you might say something that might hurt me in some way. But that's on me. You're just asking a question. We are here to help each other along that path. We are helping each other to heal. We're going to talk a little bit more about that too, kind of as we join these two questions together. Okay, so let's stop there and ask if there's anyone else.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got something on that. I think you said this early on, Roz. Mm-hmm. In one of the nights you said this, and it settled on me as we've gone through. We had Patty Krawiec here on Friday. A little more, your priestliness always shines through, right? That's who you are. Patty is a little more blunt on some things, and I get, you get those as you follow things on Twitter and in other places in the world when you're trying to figure these things out. But one of the things that you said that has always that's really settled with me, and we talk about it after when we leave. We talk about this with people quietly, is that we're all diminished by this. Like at the root of this issue is a genocide, like a crime, right? And it's very hard for us to get it will be very hard for us to all get over that. And as there's a righteousness in the First Nation side that we don't have here, right? Patty said, what did Patty say the other night? Maybe somebody who was here can remind me, but she said that her her ancestors should not be held guilty for their generosity. It was that's paraphrased. It was something like that, right? And we're the ones who are a little bit, who have wandered, who are a little bit off track. And you said that in an early, not in the same way, Roz, but that's what I'm taking away from all this, is that there's damage on every side here. The genocide that crushed the culture of First Nations in Canada has harmed us greatly, maybe more so even than the practical harm that was done to First Nations people. But there's this luggage that we have to carry with it. So that's what I take. That, you know, just this conversation has just brought that to my mind.
Thank you. That's just a wonderful comment to make, and it is true. I mean, and it's going to be what we talk further about tonight. It's really going to be settling into that question about what do we do with this, and what do we do with the pain of colonialism for the people who were the ancestors of the colonizers, because there is harm on both sides. I mean, we have to remind ourselves of that. That there really is harm on both sides. This, like you said, it's not something only one group of people needs to heal from. And yeah, there's a lot that's been stolen from you too, from colonialism. You did lose identity. You lost your own Indigenous identity. You lost being Scottish or Irish or Finnish or English or German, right? You lost cultural traditions by becoming Canadian.
We lost Canadian. We don't have Canadian traditions.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have the old paths that they walk in England. You get to walk the 1,000-year paths that have always been maintained, because we got rid of those. And the damage in that, you know, we would be better guests here having those things here and having that culture alive here. Like we miss that. I think people that come to church especially like we seek those things. I went at a powwow at First Nations a couple of years ago. We saw glimpses of this, right? And you're like, man, like the damage became acute when you saw that. For me, it became home when you saw what was, or what the culture is that should define us in this land, but doesn't. So.
Yep. Yes, thank you, and keep percolating that. Keep percolating those things, guys, as we go forward. And there might be something else that you might want to add to all of that. So yeah.
Yes, and we'll have time for questions and comments at the end. But one more.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Yes.
It brings to mind something that was a word that was brought to my attention that I hadn't been aware of. Cultural appropriation. Right? Wanting to be able to share in those really interesting and healing and helpful ceremonies, but it's not from my roots. It's from the land's roots and the people who were here before me. I'm a guest here, so I want to tread lightly on that.
Yes, and that requires a lot of kind of thought, right? To say, well, how do I want to appreciate this particular symbol or healing garden or what have you, but and I also want to partake of its healing nature, right? And you know, how do I do that without culturally appropriating? How do I? One of the things that I really bothers me is when priests or folks call me up and say, "Oh, we wanted you to come down to do the land acknowledgement," and that, you know, and I was like, "This is your land acknowledgement. This is about you acknowledging the land. This is about you taking something that maybe you've never done before, but we grew up with in Ohanda Galawadekwan. We grew up with that. As soon as our feet touches the ground, right? It's your land acknowledgement. It's your acknowledgement of the dirt under your feet, right? And when you meet someone, you're acknowledging the clay you're made of. My ancestors are from Scotland, or my ancestors are from England, or my ancestors are from Sweden, or what have you, right? That is your acknowledgement. And even if you get it wrong sometimes, you know, the pronunciation, that's okay. Somebody will tell you. It's okay to be like it seemed like Europeans, those from European extraction have a hard time being wrong. It's hard. Right? Right? But it's okay. It's okay. It's gonna be okay. Yeah. I didn't do it. It's my fault. No, it's okay. I mean, and this is the thing is that you have to get into the practice of doing that. You have to get into the practice of acknowledging land, earth, right? Taking our shoes off and earthing. Have you ever heard of that? Taking off your shoes and earth, walking around and earthing. It's called earthing. You know, it's funny because my dog does that all the time. But it is a very, very good lesson. And what you're talking about, really, when you talk about that, and I come and have engage with you just on that concern, my prayer for you is that when you express, or anyone in this room who has those kind of concerns, is that someone says to you, it's okay. It's okay to struggle with it. Mm-hmm. Because we all have to learn in little ways of how to do that a little bit better. Any one of you, if I asked any one of you to do a land acknowledgement, it would all be somewhat different. Mm-hmm. And you'd probably all struggle because it's not a thing that you do, mm-hmm. right? It's not a thing that we've been taught to do, mm-hmm. really. Even our people had to relearn the Ohana Kalawadekwa. Now every kid knows it, right? Mm-hmm. Every kid knows it now. Mm-hmm. So we had to come and relearn that too. So don't be afraid to learn and to struggle. I always think of this. When you were talking about that, and I was thinking about this. I was thinking about when Jesus came and washed feet. You know, and whenever I see that, or see that image, or read that scripture, I always think of Jesus saying, "It's okay. We're going to get through this together." Now, there's all kinds of other things you could attach to that too, right? But I always think that my prayer for you is that in everything that you engage, in anything that you struggle with, that you have someone say, okay, how are we going to get through this? How are we going to walk through this together, right? So that's what makes us Christians. That's what they know us by our love, right?
And I would say for all of us who are maybe unsure of where to start with something like that, or feel uncomfortable with the land acknowledgement, all of us here are here because we go to church, right? We believe in God, we pray. Now, when I go home, and I'm admitting this on a recording, so the bishop is going to come after me, but when I am at home, I do not pray out of the prayer book. I don't do that kind of prayer to God, right? No, I don't. I just say, God, this is what's going on with me right now, right? Can you please take care of this? Can you please, God, let my week be less busy than last week. Please, God, let me not lose my day off. Please, God, take care of these people that I love, right? I'm sure all of us do that. As much as we come to church and we say the prayers and and like you said, we do the whole Hail Mary and all these things that we know, at the end of the day, when we speak our truth to God, it's just simple. So when we manifest those prayers, when we talk to God, when we actually sit with it, we are very simple. If we treat the land acknowledgement in the same way, then what we can say is we don't have to get all the fancy political statements in there. What we can say is we stand here on a ground that has cared for so many people before us, right? We stand here on a ground that cared for so many cultures and nations before us, and that we are remembering that. That we are acknowledging that we only exist here because of all the people that came here before us. That we only exist here because of the generosity of those who invited us into this country. We acknowledge that there have been harms given, right? And we acknowledge that moving forward, we are going to commit ourselves to the fact that we all have Mother Earth as our birthplace, Mother Earth as our home. It can be as simple as that. It does not have to be complicated. But when we think of it as just speaking a simple truth, just saying that simple acknowledgement of where we are at today, then it comes from the heart, right? And it's like all of these things. All of these things, if they come from the heart, we don't need to come up with complicated theological words or philosophical words or political and sociological theory, even though I love those. And I would love to have that conversation. None of that has to happen here. Because truth and reconciliation does not have to be that hard. Right? So on that note, we're going to ask you a question. Okay? And it shouldn't be too hard of a question, but we're going to ask you this question. What do you think reconciliation will look like? When? Well, when do you think we'll be fully reconciled? What do you think that looks like? What would fully reconciled look like? I see some gears shifting. Don't have to have a perfect answer.
I hope I don't start to cry. When the partly Indigenous man who's raised my grandchildren and was afraid of me makes me a cup of chai latte from scratch and sends it out to the car. To me,
That's beautiful. Thank you. Anybody else? What is your vision of reconciliation? You can hang on to that. Oh, we got one over here. No, you whatever.
It's a bit like every relationship, I would say. It would be for me to know the gift and to acknowledge the gift and to miss the presence of the gift when not in the conversation, and that there is mutual knowledge of each other's gift and that we affirm each other's gift and that we miss each other when we are not together in the conversation.
Thank you. I love that point about missing each other when we're not in the conversation. I think that's such a lovely way of saying that. I think I saw, Janet, did you have your hand up?
I was thinking that it's bigger than just non-Indigenous and Indigenous people. For me, reconciliation is like the whole world. Don't know if it'll ever happen, but no homeless and no hungry. And yeah.
I think that's perfect. Yes.
And what you said, and clean water for all, and prisons that are not primarily filled with First Nations peoples. Like,
I want to say equality for all. Yeah.
Yep.
And I wanted to pick up on what, forgot your name, said about everyone's gifts. That everyone is recognized for the gifts they have, not what they have not.
If there's anything online, any of those that are watching online, if you have anything to say, just write it in. I'm
And
just
I
making a message to people up there in P-land. If you have anything to say, send it.
I think there is also something about recognition to being on the land and belonging to the land. When I look at our sisters and brothers in Palestine or in other parts of the world, there is a strong relationship with people identifying with the land and having a birthright to the land.
I think that's a very important point. I mean, when we talk about indigenizing or decolonizing, we're not talking about like go out and get something to smudge with, or go out and start saying the Haudenosaunee Great Thanksgiving. We're talking about understanding that each and every one of us is a part of creation. And at the heart of all of us, wherever we came from, there is an understanding that we belong to creation, right? Even our creation story tells us that we belong to creation. We belong in creation. And I think a big part of a lot of our problems, especially to do with reconciliation, has to do with the fact that we've forgotten that we have a responsibility to creation. Any other last comments? No, we have one. We have one from online. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Perhaps when we can invite each other into our homes and break bread together, share a meal together, reconciliation will look like a healthy appreciation and curiosity for one another. Beautiful. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Oh, there's a set. Oh, no, I read both of them. Yeah. Renee and Leah, I read both your comments.
Okay.
But I think what we're really talking about here, what all of us are kind of circling around, I mean, for Christians, we would say it's kingdom building, right? It's kingdom building. What is reconciliation but a kingdom project? When we come here every week to participate in our sacramental Eucharist, what are we doing but reconciling ourselves to one another and to God? We are coming here to put right all the things that we have done wrong. And when we talk about reconciliation between ourselves and God, we're talking about that. But when we're talking about reconciliation between greater society and just those who have been marginalized or oppressed, we are still talking about that same thing. We are talking about the ability to put things right. And that requires some things from us. And I think that's really what we wanted to spend this evening talking about, is the things that reconciliation requires from us. And I'm gonna let Roz take over here, because you are writing about this right now. Mm-hmm. For a couple different publications, writing about this. Mm-hmm. So Roz is going to share with us her expertise on this.
Expertise, just okay. A distillation.
A distillation. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, I will hand it over to you to distill us.
So as we mark our final night in this particular gathering, we began with, what did we begin with? Does anyone remember what we began with? Identity. But the very first thing that came out. Okay, maybe I should ask this. What is this gathering called? What we're doing here? Do you remember the title of it? The two row. Can anyone tell me what the two row is?
It's a walk, and then there's two, but walking side by side. But it's parallel.
Yeah. 2 rows.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You exist together without competition or strife. Anyone else? Anyone else? Have anything to say about the 2 row? Because this is what we're doing. We are learning to walk the 2 row together and kind of revisit many different ways that we can talk about the 2 row, right? Many different ways that we can talk about it. But what I want to get through, and what we've been talking about really, really in depth, is this idea of relationship and anyone? Responsibility. Relationship and responsibility. Now this concept of relationship and responsibility go together, yes, but it also tells us in the very basic way how we can get along with each other and how we can bring that equity, equality. What's the proper word, Hannah? You're good at this. Equity or equality?
Well, it depends on what
justice.
Justice. Okay.
Justice, right?
I was going to give you a poli-sci
Okay,
answer.
I was waiting for the policy. I said, but not.
Okay.
And here's the thing: is that I always look to my mom and dad, but I think those of you couples, a couple, gosh, that responsibility in your relationship. What happens when you don't shut the garage door, right? What happens when you don't take the garbage out when you're told, right? When you're told, right? Okay, right? Or what happens when, yeah, that's sort of, like, all of these things when you're told, right? What happens when that relationship and responsibility break down for some reason? It could be because of illness, it could be because of children, it could be because all kinds of different things could help, could break down that concept, right? But if you're going to stay together in a marriage and in a relationship, you're going to have to come back to, well, what are my responsibilities? Right? What are my responsibilities? And whether you're in a student-teacher relationship, what are my responsibilities to you as a student or to me as your teacher? What are those responsibilities? Right? This governs. This really governs. And it just in the world today, it just, we talked a lot about some really nice, warm and fuzzy things, right? About reconciliation. We talked about love, right? And it kind of bothers me that when we do talk about those things, that the world, modern media, will say, oh, that is so like warm and fuzzy, right? Warm and fuzzy. And of course you have, now let's look at there are many conflicts that are going on in the world right now. I think the conflict that is really predominant is, of course, Palestine and Israel. And you hear 2 sides. You hear of the violence and the brutality of Hamas. Then you hear of the violence and the brutality of Israel. And then you hear of Palestinians saying that this is our land, you kicked us out of our homes, right? Then you hear Israel saying, we were kicked out of our homes, and and we didn't have anything anywhere in the world. So you hear all of these stories, right? And so you have pundits, talking heads that say, well, because Israel is a state, Israel has a responsibility to be pacifist. And so, but here's what happens is that we have the brutality of Hamas. What would happen if Israel just declared themselves as pacifists, and what would happen? Well, Hamas would tear them to shreds. These are the things that are being talked about, right? But here's what's not being talked about, is responsibility. Why isn't that being talked about? Because if you are going to be responsible, that also means that you have to be honorable. It also means that you have to be vulnerable. And we don't want to do that anymore. We're too afraid. And right, there is a lot of profit in war. And Halliburton has made billions out of the Iraq conflict. But we are not taking that, we're not bringing that out. We're not being responsible to the creation of Israel, nor are we being responsible to the Palestinian communities, the ghettos. We are not being responsible to the actual brutality against the Israeli people who are just living their lives, going to the supermarket, going to school, doing their jobs. We're not talking about that sickness that brings out that kind of brutality. Right? That very same sickness, that when that brutality thing happens, that it sets off a lot of trauma triggers in grandparents and a collective memory of what happened in Treblinka, in Auschwitz, right? In Sobibor. What is wrong? Why are we not looking at those things and saying, we keep doing this to ourselves and to each other? But that requires a vulnerability. That requires an honesty. It is a scary thing. And so, how do we talk about those things? How do we talk about those things? That's a big, big subject, and it's a big heaviness in our world right now. Ukraine, Russia is another big, big heaviness in the world right now. All that history between Russia and the Ukraine. All of that history between Israel and Palestine. All that history between Israel and what Israel is now and the Holy Land. All that history between Christians and Muslims, going all the way back to before the Crusades. What do we do with all of that? And of course we come over to this land. All of that history between England and North America. All that history between Portugal and South America. Spanish in South America. Oh my gosh, Africa, West Africa, and America. All of that history that we are repeating over and over and over and over again. So you see this discussion that we have with truth and reconciliation, all the conversation that we have about the two-row, all the conversation we have about relationships and responsibility applies to everything that our lives are and whatever destiny that we want to
And then he said, you know what?